Welcome back, everybody, to episode 9 of our programming series. We're going to continue our discussion on functions, and we're going to be talking specifically about declarations versus definitions, and then header files versus implementations. Here we are in Visual Studio using C++ because Java does not support header files, and they don't split the definition from the declaration of functions. So we're using C++. Anyway, we have our main function as always, and this program is designed to add two numbers. So we're just printing this to the screen, 5 plus 10, and let's see what this gives us. So it gives us result is 15. The thing about our main file is we want to make sure that it's concise and to the point, and we want to reduce the amount of code that's in it. And this is a general rule of thumb with any function. You want to make sure it's concise and it's organized. So one way we can reduce the amount of code is by creating a function for this method of adding two numbers. So we'll just say a return type of int, and then we'll call it add two numbers, and then we'll pass in two parameters, so an int x and an int y, and then we'll go ahead and do what's called defining the function. So this is where we're going to say what we're actually doing with the function. So we're going to say we're returning the value, the integer value of x plus y. So there you go. That's our function definition. Now we can replace these hardwired values up here with with a call to the function add two numbers. So here we go, and we'll pass in the same numbers, 5 and 10. All right, and now we're going to get an error because we don't have what's called the function declaration, and we need a function declaration because when we compile this file, the compiler starts at the top and works its way down. So it starts up here, moves down, and then it reaches this thing called add two numbers, but it hasn't compiled anything called add two numbers yet. So it has no idea what this entails. So we need to add what's called a function declaration, and all the function declaration it's the stuff before the curly braces in the function definition. So we just copy that and put it above the main. Now when we go ahead and compile this file, it'll start at the top and then it'll work its way down, and now it has a reference to the actual implementation of the function. So when we try to call this function called add two numbers, the compiler knows to look up here, and then this declaration will point us down to the implementation. So if we run this should compile successfully, and it does. So we have a result of 15. Now, one way we can make this file less cluttered and remove a bunch of code is by creating other files and copying this code into those files. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to add two files. I'm just going to use a shortcut. So I'm going to call these files function h and functions.cpp. So the functions h is what's known as a header file, and then the functions.cpp is the actual implementation file. So we'll go ahead and create those, and don't worry about this. We don't need to worry about that. So now we're going to just copy the declaration into the header file. So we have a reference to the actual function, and then in the functions.cpp, the implementation file, we'll go ahead and copy over the definition. Okay, so now once we have that done, you can see in our implementation file, we have a link to the functions.h file. And what we have to do is in our main file, we have to include that header file. So we'll include at the top here, this is called a preprocessor directive. We'll include, and we have to use quotations because we made this file ourselves. It's not a built-in library. So we'll say functions.h. And now our main file, which tries to call this function in the functions.h, has a way to access it. So when we say include a file, basically we're taking the contents of that file and putting it right where that statement is. That's what the compiler's doing. So now when we try to call this function, it'll link over to this declaration, and the declaration will link over to the implementation because we have a link to the header file. So now if we try to run this, it should still work. And you can see it built successfully and it gave us the correct result. So again, we have a header file that has our function declarations, and then a implementation file that has our definitions. And we must include the link to the header file in our implementation files that uses that declaration. One thing to denote is our header files have this thing called hashtag pragma once. And what this does is if I try to include this file 2 times, so if I accidentally say include functions.h again, what this line does is it tells the compiler, hey, we already included this, you don't have to include it again. And another way to do the exact same thing, this is called an inclusion guard, by the way. We can just say hashtag if and def. This stands for if not defined. So if we haven't already defined what this header file is in our main where we included it, then we'll go ahead and define it. So we have to give it a name, so we'll just give it the name functions. And then we say if it's not defined already, then we're going to define it as functions. And then after all of our code, we're going to say hashtag end if. And that's just another way to do the pragma once thing.